We'll be starting in just about a minute. Okay, welcome on behalf of Holocaust Museum, Los Angeles. My name is Michael Morgenstern, and I'm an educator at the museum. And this morning, I'm pleased to welcome you to our virtual discussion with Joe Alexander, a Holocaust survivor from Poland. For those of you who have not been to the museum, Holocaust Museum Los Angeles is the first Holocaust survivor-founded Holocaust museum in the United States. In the 1960s, a group of survivors worked together to create a memorial for their loved ones who perished in the Holocaust. This memorial eventually became Holocaust Museum Los Angeles. These survivors who established our museum did so with a mission to commemorate, educate, and inspire future generations. Furthermore, they mandated that our museum should always be free to the public, making Holocaust education accessible to everyone. Even though we're not able to be in our museums a physical space for the time being, we are still able to carry forward their mission. This morning, you have the honor and privilege of listening to Joe Alexander, who will share his story with you. After Joe shares his story, you can type in questions and he'll answer as many as possible. Before March, when we started working from home, Joe was one of our most frequent speakers at the museum. He was there at least once a week, sharing his story to countless number of students and all visitors and really everybody. And he has been so active for the last few years in making sure we never forget this history. And so, Joe, I'm so honored to welcome you this morning. Thank you so much for being with us and for sharing your story with us. Okay, and you can start now.
My name is Joseph Alexander. I'm a Holocaust survivor from Poland. And I survived 12 camps. I come from a small town in Poland where I had a family, I had parents, and I had 3 sisters and 2 brothers, and I'm the only survivor. We lived in a small town. My father was in business, and we had a very good life until 1939, when the Germans came in to town. After a few weeks, they came into, and we lived, every town in Europe has a town square, and where most of the business are in that town square. We lived in a town square. It shows about the second house from this corner here, and the third house was an uncle of mine. And it came in after a few weeks, and it came after my uncle, and went around the square. And I said to everybody, you have 10 minutes to get your possessions and get out in the middle of the square. For some reason, which I'll never know, why they left those 3 houses where we were the second one, and my uncle the third one, why they left us and didn't touch us. But the rumor started right away that they're going to come back 3 days later and take the rest of us. So my dad said, well, I'm not going to wait for them to come and get us 10 minutes to get out. So my dad had 3 sisters living about 25 kilometers before Warsaw. Actually, I forgot, but they came into town, to Poland, they cut Poland in half. They divided two halves in Poland. One half was annexed to the Third Reich, to Germany. The second part was Poland under German occupation. Their life was going on almost normal, except they were occupied by Germans. So my dad had 3 sisters living there. So he said, well, we're going to move there. So he got a big, deep wagon and we packed up most of the stuff from the store and moved there. One wagon. I remained with my 2 older sisters and we packed up another wagon. And in the meantime, you had Polish people coming into town and they were trying to buy anything they can get. So in my first incident I sold to a farmer, I sold him a bicycle and I sold him a boat of shirt material. On the way home, he had to pass the police station. So he got stopped and asked him, where did you get this? They thought maybe they were looting already. So he said, I bought it and show me a receipt. He said, I don't have a receipt. Then go bring the person who sold it to you. So he came back to me and he said, you have to come with me to the police station. If not, they're going to come here. So I went with him to the police station and he asked me, did you sell him this? I said, yes. Why didn't you give him a receipt? I said, we in Poland, we didn't give receipts. So he told that boat the material, smacked the guy and said, okay, here, go. And let me go. And I went back and my sisters were waiting, ready to go, ready to take off. So I came back and we left with the second wagon. And we went to a little town, 25 kilometers before Warsaw, named Bologna. So we came there. And like I said, life was going on almost normal. People were still in business and everything. But being there about 2 or 3 weeks, that's when I had to go to my first camp. Everybody had to go to work. So I went to a camp not far from home. And I worked there building a canal. And building a canal is we were digging staying inside in the water up to the knee almost, without boots. And that was late October, beginning of November. So after working there for a while, I got blood poisoning. I had sores on my legs, on my arms. And then there we worked a week, and on the weekend you could go home. So after a while, after I had the sores, I went home on the weekend and I said, I'm not going back. So on Monday morning, the police came to look for me. And my dad said, he's not here. He's supposed to be in the camp. So anyway, I stayed away from home for a few weeks until things figured cool off. And that was the time when they started to build the wall in the Warsaw Ghetto, where the Warsaw Ghetto was going to be. So after they got through building the wall, they came out within 50, 60 kilometers of the surrounding area of Warsaw. Everybody had to move into the ghetto. So we moved into the ghetto. The life in the ghetto, you can't even imagine how terrible it was. It was so bad. People were dying. And I walked out in the morning, dead people on the street, on the sidewalks, everywhere. But so I lived in the ghetto for about almost 5 months. And back home, everything was the same. Since we left, nothing changed. So my parents decided for an older sister and a younger brother and I, we should go back home. So to go back home, you had to pay off the guard at the gate to get out. So we paid off the guards and we got out and decided that I take one street and my sister and brother, they take another street, and we walk to the outskirts of town. That's where we meet. I walked for about a couple of blocks and I had a Polish teenager comes over and he said, give me some money, I'm gonna report you. So I figured I gave him some money and I got rid of him. And I kept walking. But he got on a streetcar and rode the streetcar for a few blocks. And then he comes over again, give me some more money. So this time I gave him some more money, but I changed streets and I lost him. So I walked to the outskirts of town and I met my sister and brother and we went home. So we got home. Like I said, everything was the same since we left. Nothing changed. But it lasted 3 days. I was free for 3 days. After being there 3 days, they came out and ordered every Jewish man from 16 to 60 report to the schoolhouse. So I had to report to the schoolhouse and off I went to the camps. And that's when I was going from camp to camp. The camps I was going, I was working, very hard work. First camp I worked, we were building a dam where they had the little electric carts where you load them up, you cut down some hills and load them up, and then they take them to another place and they dump it. And that was very hard work. We had to use picks to loosen up the ground. And the food you were getting was in the morning, you got a piece of bread like this and a cup of coffee, and you went to work. You came back from work, you got a soup. And most of the time, the soup was either spinach or peas from the potatoes. From that food, you couldn't exist. We worked with civilians. So if you could organize even a little extra food, that's the only way you could exist. So somehow I always had managed to get some extra food. Then after a while doing this, I went to another camp. The other camp we was waiting, laying cobblestones on the streets. Then I was working as a building a sewer. In another camp, I was a roofer. I did all kinds of different work. Then I worked at an airport. We were building an airport. I was laying the railroad tracks. And like I say, all these works was all very hard work and little food. And after being about 7 camps, a train arrived and we got on the train because you never know where you're going. And the train, it wasn't a passenger train, it was a cattle car train where you got 30, 40 people into one boxcar, with a little window of about 2 feet. I don't know if you could see it here, maybe, what the boxcar looked like. Well, anyway, so we got on the train and we were riding around for 3 days. No food, no water, no facilities, nothing. By the time we arrived, it was actually the destination we were going. It takes about 5-6 hours at the most. But we were riding around for 3 days. And then we arrived in Auschwitz. So we arrived in Auschwitz and it was in the middle of the night, and the train stopped. There's a little town named Oshvenchim, where the train stopped there. And later on, they built the trains to go straight into the camp. But at that time, they didn't have that yet. So the train stopped, and about 30–40% of the people were dead on the train already. Whoever could walk, we got out and were lined up in the rows of 5. And I met Dr. Joseph Mengele. If you heard about Dr. Mengele, he was called the doctor of death. He selected people to go to the gas chamber. And we went through, and he said there's 6 kilometers to walk to the camp. So he's going to pick some people to go to the left. And those people on the left are going to be taken on trucks. So he picked out old people, sick people, young people, and he told me to go to the left. But if I would come from home, I wouldn't know the difference. But I was already in 7 camps when I came to Auschwitz. In every camp, I had to go to work as I was trying to get in to the biggest, the strongest men. And here I look around, I see old people, sick people. And I said, this is not the kind of people I like to be with. And my luck was after midnight. With the daytime, I don't think I could have done it. As Dr. Mengele moved further down, I ran back to the other side. If I didn't run back to the other side, I wouldn't be here talking to you. Because the people were taken on the trucks, people on the left, went straight to the gas chamber. So I ran back and we walked to Auschwitz. We came to Auschwitz, we got a shower, and I came out of the shower and I got a tattoo. So you can see here. And from that moment on, you had no name. That number was your name. Number is 142584. That was your name. So you got the tattoo, and then I walked over to Birkenau, which is Auschwitz number 2. Birkenau is only about 3 kilometers apart from Auschwitz. So I went to Birkenau, and I was in Birkenau for a few months. And I saw Dr. Mengele 2 more times there, but the daytime, and I was far away from where he was. Anyway, I got through. But then the camp was getting small. They didn't bring any people in, and they were taking people out. So I was trying to get out of there. But the only way I could is to get something where I wanted to. I knew where we going or something. So at one time they said they need some tailors. And my whole family, my grandfather, my father, we are all tailors. So I report, and they come in front of me, and I said, we have enough. You go back. We don't need any more. So I'm still back. And that was around the time with the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. So after the uprising, they said they need a big transport, but they didn't want to take any people from Poland. They only wanted from Hungary, Greece, Italy. But on the end, they were short about 300 people, what they needed, the amount they needed. They said, now we take some from Poland. So I report and got on the train, and the same thing, we were riding around for 3 days with no food, no water, no facilities. And that's the time I was going back to the Warsaw Ghetto for the second time. We went back to clean up after the uprising. When they burned out, all the houses were burned out. There were just the remaining walls and nothing else. No camp. We didn't have a camp, nothing. We gave us some prefabs to put together some barracks. And we had no facilities until we built a camp on Sunday. We went, you got a shower, and you got some fresh clothes. So, but the work we were doing there is taking down all these remaining walls from the buildings, brick by brick, and cleaning them up and put them up in stacks about 8-10 feet high. And then you had the Polish people coming in with a horse and wagon, and they were taking these bricks to the railroad station. They were shipping them back to Germany. But that was the only camp. I had plenty of food because we found a lot of stuff in the burned out buildings, household goods, clothes, furniture pieces. And when the Polish people came in with to take the bricks to the railroad station, they brought in food and we traded. So we had plenty of food there. Then the typhus broke out. Typhus broke out. Anybody who report went to the hospital, that was the end. Nobody came out. Typhus is where you get a high fever, high temperature. And I got high fever, but I didn't go to the hospital because I had a couple, what we call a couple, like a foreman. He was a middle-aged German man. He was also a prisoner. So he didn't care if we worked or you didn't. So because of him, so I didn't have to do anything. I was sitting behind those stacked bricks like that and for about 3 days to get over the temperature. So I got over the temperature and then I was okay. So a couple of days after that, the Polish underground attacked our camp. They were trying to free us. They were fighting all night, were unsuccessful. So the next morning, they closed the camp, they took us out, and we had to go out through town to Warsaw. But we had to jog. We couldn't walk even, because they were afraid that the underground may attack us in the city. So we jogged out until we got out of town. Got out of town, it was late in the afternoon, and they put us up on a big field where farmers graze their cows. They put us up on that field, and the ground in those fields are very moist. So whatever means you had, a knife, a spoon, anything, that you could dig up some mud. So you dug up some mud and take the bottom of the shirt and squeezed it through to get a little water. So we got a little water in the morning, we start walking and come to the next town. There was a river. So they let us go to the river to get some water. Two of our people went a little too far in the river. They were afraid, thought maybe they're going to want to escape. So they got shot, got killed right in the river. So we got some water and we start walking. We walked, come the next day, we come to the next town, was the same river, but they said this time only 100 people at a time can go to the river to get some water. So we got the river, we got some water, and we start walking. And that was a day that you thought that the sky fell in. So the rain, such a heavy rain, that we were walking, it was soaking wet. Finally, we arrived at the railroad station and we stayed overnight. The next morning, another train arrived, the same kind of train. And we got on the train and we were on the train this time about 3.5 days with no food, no water, nothing. And we arrived in Germany. We went to Germany to a camp named Dachau. Dachau was the first camp Hitler built in 1933 for political prisoners. Then he turned it into a concentration camp. It was another death camp. So came to Dachau, and I was in Dachau about 2 weeks doing nothing because they were establishing 12 camps within 50, 60 kilometers surrounding area of Dachau. So after I did that, so I went to a camp called Camp Bow by Number, from 1 to 12 were the camps. I went to camp number 1, and I was working for a farmer digging potatoes. So that lasted about 3 weeks. That was okay because one of us was always had a fire and we were baking potatoes. So everybody got a baked potato. So after 3 weeks, I was sent to another camp about 50 kilometers from Dachau to a city named Landsberg am Lech. And that was camp number 7. Camp number 7 was a small camp with only about 150 people. But by the time I got to camp number 7, there were a few of us who were in the camps already over 40 years. So we got the privilege of getting the better jobs. So my friends, there were the kitchen, there were the police in the camp and some other little things. And that was the only camp there was where women was in the same camp, but they were chained off by wire fence, 1/4 of the camp, but we went to work together. So I got a group of 10 people with 5 girls and 5 boys. And we worked right outside the gate of the camp for the kitchen for the German guards. So the kitchen for German guards, I had 2 German men in charge of the kitchen. They were very good to me. They were not the regular army. They were, I don't know if they're the reserve or something, because they were a different uniform. So, but they were very good to me. So I worked there, and every day I was going back to the work to the camp. I took food back for my friends, and we had food leftover soup. So we had the big milk cans, and I put it in the milk can. And the next day, people were going to work in the morning. They had to pass by our kitchen. So I used to stop them and give them some food. A couple of times, the officer in charge of the guard complained that I'm holding up the people going to work. But my people who I worked for, they said, let them talk, don't worry about it, do what you're doing. So I did it for a while until April 28, 1945. All the 12 subcamps had to go back to Dachau. So all came back to Dachau, stayed overnight. And the next morning, we went what they called a dead march. We went on the road and we were marching. And they're supposed to take us into the mountains in Germany. There's a ski resort named Garmisch. And they're supposed to kill us in the mountain there. But we were walking for about 2 days. We knew we're not going to be walking too far because we could hear the fighting. So we knew that the American troops are not far behind us. So after walking over 2 days, we crossed a little bridge, and that little bridge was blown up. So half of our people were on one side, one on the other side. I was on the side where we were in a village, and in that village there was a little forest. They took us into the forest in that village and asked for the volunteers to take the sick people into the farmers and put them into the farmer barns and the volunteers, they come back. The volunteers come back. One was a friend of mine, and on the way back, they found a dead horse in the snow. So they cut up some pieces from the horse, and my friend comes back and gives me a piece of meat, and he said, do something. So I made a fire. We were in the forest. We had plenty of wood. So I made a fire, and I was barbecuing. Believe me, that was the best meal we had in a long time. And during the night, the guards disappeared. So in the morning, the police came and they took us into that village and they disappeared. So we were walking around the village. That was in the morning, about between 8 and 9 o'clock. We were just walking around in the village until about between 12 and 1 o'clock. We saw the American tank moved in. We were liberated. When the American tank moved in, so there was a few of us, we were about 9 of us. We didn't want to get blocked in because the American tank, and after them, the American troops arrived. So they tried to block the village, not to let anybody out. But we were 9 of us. We were in the camps over 5 years already. So we didn't want to get blocked in, so we got through and started to walk to see where the next town is. So we walked for about 1 or 2 kilometers, and there was a German bakery. So we got into the bakery, and everybody got a bread. So you had a bread, you were okay. And start to walk to see where to the town. We come into the next town, and we see about 3 American soldiers, but they were Czechoslovakian descent. And they were so drunk that they couldn't walk. They were holding on to each other. And they saw us coming. They saw the group, I guess, the way we were dressed. They realized. So they asked, are you Polish? We said, yes. So come on. So they took us in to an underground bunker, which was a warehouse. You couldn't see the end of it. And probably anything you can think of was in that warehouse. So the first thing, we changed clothes, and everybody took a backpack and put some food in. And then there was a big row of bicycles, but they're chained up. So they broke the chain, and everybody got a bicycle. Then we have to find a place to stay, because when the American troops came into the village, they brought all the people into that same town. There was a German Air Force base. They put the people in there and made a DP camp, a displaced person camp. But we didn't want to go to a camp. I had over 5 years of camps. So we didn't want to. So we tried to get out on our own. But then we're trying to get out on the street. You couldn't get out because 6 o'clock was curfew. It was after 6 o'clock. So we hopped over some fences, about 3 or 4 fences, and we wind up in a German inn, but it was taken over by the American troops. But in the back of the inn was an empty house. So we took over the house, and we lived in that house about 10 days. After being there, living about there 10 days, they came out with an order that anybody who lives outside the camp has to move into the camp. So to move into the camp, we were taken back to Munich, to a DP camp in Munich, a big DP camp, but you were free. You wanted to live in the camp, you could live, or you can go any place you want. So we stayed, a few of my friends and I, we stayed in the camp for about 3 days. And then we decided to go back to the city of Landsberg, where we were, camp number 7 was, where the last camp was, to go back there. in Landsberg was one of the largest DP camp in Germany. So went back there, went to the camp, registered. They gave us a room. So I stayed there overnight because I didn't want to live in the camp anymore. And I moved out about 7 kilometers from town to a farm, and I lived in a farmhouse. I lived in a farmhouse for about 5 or 6 weeks, something like that. And I decided to go back to Poland, go back to my hometown to find out if anybody of my family survived. So I came back, and there were some survivors who lived in my house. And they said nobody of my immediate family, but one cousin of mine. He was a year younger than I. We went to cheder, went to school together. We grew up together. And he survived, but he is in a different town. And that was a time in Poland was very bad for survivors, because survivors came back and the Polish people were killing survivors. There's a one town named Selce where they killed 42 survivors in the one town. So it was very bad. So I said, I'm going to get my cousin and I'm going back to Germany. Germany was the safest place you could be at the time. So I went and I got him and we went back to Germany. And I stayed in Germany for 4 more years because there's no place you could go. You didn't have a passport. Nobody wanted you. So we stayed there for 4 years. Then at one time they said you can go register. They were registered. You can go to Canada. So I went to register to go to Canada. Then it took a long time. You didn't hear anything. You have to wait until they call you. You didn't hear anything. Then a friend of mine lived in the next village. He said, Joe, you can go now to Munich. They're registering to go to America. So I went, registered to go to America, and didn't take long, only about 2 weeks or so. And I got a notice to go to see the German doctor. And past the doctor, then you had to go through the FBI to check you out. And a short time after this, I get a note to go to get the boat, go to Bremenhaven to get the boat to go to America. And I arrived in the United States on May 30th. That was Memorial Day at the time. And I arrived in New York. And I was in New York for about 3 days. And everybody, whoever came, had to have a sponsor. Either you had some relatives or you got some Jewish organization to sponsor you. I didn't have any relatives here. And I was sponsored by the Joint, the Jewish organization. So my contract was Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. So I went to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and I lived there for 6 months. But I came to Harrisburg. I worked for a man who had a cleaning store in tuxedo rentals. The man, a father couldn't be better than he was to me. Very good. So then, after being there for 6 months, when I arrived in New York, about 2 weeks later, about 2 months later, my cousin, who survived with me, he had an uncle here in Santa Monica. So he was his sponsor. So he came here and then he went to Santa Monica. So he told the uncle that I was in Pennsylvania, and we were the only two survivors from both of our families. So the uncle called me a few times. I should come here so we can be together again. So I came to California, January 1950. Came to California, and here I am. I'm still here in California. So that's my story now. And I also, I speak a lot to a lot of schools here. A lot of schools, I talk to those kids and I tell them, remember there's a lot of anti-Semitism going on here. You have some Holocaust deniers. Don't listen what they tell you because it's not true. Here you're talking to a survivor who survived the Holocaust. The evidence on all the camps are still in existence. You go to Auschwitz, Dachau, Majdanek, Treblinka, all these places, the gas chambers and the ovens are still there. You have thousands of people daily going there. So don't believe what they tell you. And if you hear or see anything, it's not right, don't be afraid to report to the authorities. So that's what I keep telling these kids. And I get letters from them. I thought in the beginning that they don't pay attention when I talk. But then when I get those letters, they repeat the words I told. Because a lot of them ask me, how did you survive? Did you ever think of giving up? I said, no, I never gave up giving up. I never lost hope. I said to him, I may have had a bad day, I said, but tomorrow I hope it will be a better day. I witnessed in Auschwitz where people were running to the electric fence getting electrocuted. I saw people being beaten to death. I had to watch 3 hangings, but I never lost hope and never gave up. So that was my message to those kids at the schools. So here we are. Now, anybody got any questions for me? I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you so much, Joe, for sharing your story with us this morning. We do have questions from the audience, but before we do that, I wanted to show some of your photos. So if you're in the audience, feel free to type in questions and we'll get to those in just a minute. But I'm going to show some of Joe's photos. Okay.
Yeah.
Joe, I think we lost your video.
No, you didn't. Because
there you are.
I got the picture.
Oh,
I got
okay.
it. Oh,
Great.
I have.
Okay,
Yeah.
everything's great. Thank
Yeah,
you so much. Okay, so this is the first photo I wanted to show.
Yeah. On the right, on the top right, is my father. The next to him is his brother, where he left Poland for England, lived in London. And these are my grandparents. And that picture was taken in 1923 at the border of Poland and Germany, because he couldn't come back to Poland because he left. He didn't want to go to the army. So that picture was taken at the border in 1923.
So Joe, this photo was taken just about within a year after you were born.
That's right.
So.
And that was my sister.
And which sister is this?
This is the oldest. She was the oldest, Shlomis. And this is a picture, let's see, this is the way we lived in the camps, like shelves and there were one section was for 3 people. On this picture, if you see the second row on the bottom, I don't know if you can see me, that was Elie Wiesel, was right here. So that's the picture taken in Buchenwald, I believe.
Yes, this was Buchenwald.
Yeah. This is a picture of myself, my cousin, and my friend. This was the one, the friend on the left, the tall guy. His name was Joe Buddha. He was the one, the friend, who brought that piece of horse meat when he came back to the village. And that picture was taken in Germany, where I live. Right here, I lived up on the 2nd floor there in a farm.
And is this your cousin?
And that's my cousin to the right.
Okay.
This is a driver's license from Germany with no expiration date. So there it is.
So do you drive when you go to Germany?
Yes. This is the picture from a liberation from Dachau. As you can see on the bottom here, Camp Dachau. And so that's that. And what you got the next? What's the next?
I wanted
Oh,
to show this was you in California.
I'm in California. That was actually in the George Air Force Base in Victorville. That's
So
yeah.
wanted to share those photos with the audience. Now we have quite a few questions here. Do you know why the Polish people killed survivors after the war?
Yeah.
Do you know why the Polish people killed survivors after the war?
Why the Polish people were survived? Oh, why the
Why
Polish
the
people
Polish
killed?
people
Killed.
killed survivors?
Yes, they did, because when they took the Jews out, they moved into their houses. And when the survivors came back, they didn't want to give up the house. That's why they were killing the Jews. Did you get that, Michael? I know I lost you.
Yes,
You
thank you.
lost your sound. Yeah.
Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
What happened to your cousin?
Well, cousin, he survived. He lived here. He passed away a few years ago.
What did you do in Santa Monica when you went there?
Well, I wasn't. I was there in Santa Monica. Actually, his uncle had a store in the Riverside. So we were working at the store there. But then, that was 1950, the Korean War started. And there's a base in Victorville where it was a big Air Force base. But after the war, they closed the base. Then 1950, the Korean War started to reopen the base because they mobilized the National Guard here, and they were sent to this base. And from there they were shipped out to Korea. So there was a man in San Bernardino before, when the base was operating during the war. He had a cleaning store and a tailor shop. But now, when they reopened the base, he wanted the cleaning, but he didn't want the tailoring. So he came to the manager of the uncle's store in Riverside, and I don't know how he found out that we were there, that if we want to take the tailoring. So we talked, so He said, yes. So we got the concession, got the contract. And my manager came to me, Joe, we can go take the tailor shop there and we'll be partners. So that was, I wasn't here maybe a little over a year. And I had already a government contract, my name on a government contract. So we took the base there, the tailor shop. And after a while, after a short time, we got rid of this partner. And my cousin, I got my cousin there, and we took over. And I lived in Victorville for about 7 years. And I was coming to Los Angeles every weekend. So after 7 years, I said, I got enough desert. I'm going to go to Los Angeles and open a store in Los Angeles. So in 1957, I opened a store in Los Angeles with a partner, and we were on Melrose, 1 block east of Paramount Studio. So we were there for 37 years until 1994, and I retired from then. But before that, most of the movies, military movies or TV movies with military uniforms, they came from us. We all sold them old military uniforms. So until 1994, he sold the store and he retired. So now my job now is to speak to the school, to the kids, or to everybody, to let them know what happened.
Thank you so much, Joe. Did you have a family, and was your wife a survivor?
No, my wife was born here in Scranton, Pennsylvania. I had a wife, and we were married for 38 years, and she passed away. She had cancer. And I have a daughter and a son.
What languages did you speak growing up, and which ones do you still speak?
Well, growing up, is my main language was Yiddish. That was everything, the whole town, every Jew spoke Yiddish. And the only time you spoke Polish when you're in school, actually I had public school. Because after school I went to Cheder, to a Jewish Hebrew school. But the only time you spoke Polish when you're in contact with the Polish person. But all the Jews, everybody spoke Yiddish. And today I can still speak. I speak about 4 languages now. I speak Yiddish, Polish, Polish, German, and English.
Have you felt like you have resentment towards Germans?
Well, yes, I do, but it's no use. You can't go on living with hate. Especially now it's not the same Germany now. German now is different because I say I lived for 4 years after the war in Germany, and I've been back a few times. So, matter of fact, not 2015, I was invited to come back to Germany to celebrate 70 years the liberation of Dachau. And they paid all the expenses. So I went back, and I say, probably saw it, maybe I spoke to Angela Merkel there in Dachau, and it was the people, they couldn't do enough for us when we were there. I also was invited this year, to come to celebrate the 75th anniversary, but I didn't go this time. So it's a different Germany now.
Thank you. Do you know what happened to your friend who got the horse meat?
He passed away a few years ago here in Los Angeles. Here, his wife is still alive here, and he has a son in the family. They're alive, and we're very close. We're very close touch with them.
And just as a reminder, how old were you when you entered your first camp?
16.
Somebody would like to know if you have any thoughts on how young students, when you speak to them, how they react to hearing your story and the things that you did for survival, such as getting water from mud.
How because I get letters from them, and they react very favorably, very nice, very good letters. Because, like I said, I didn't think in the beginning that they're paying attention. But when I get the letters from them, I've had probably close to maybe 2,000 letters from kids from the schools. And every letter, they repeat the words I tell them. They always say, I'll remember as long as I live that never give up. Don't lose hope, never give up. So it means that it has a big effect on them.
That's why we're so grateful to have you as a part of our community. Have you been to Israel?
Yes, I was there twice. First time I was there with my family, my wife and the kids in 1972. And then I went back in 2007. That was the last time I was there.
A few of our audience members would like to know if you've ever written a book or have had your story recorded.
No, I've never wrote a book. The only story I ever recorded was, as you probably know, is I had in the Jewish Journal was, I don't know how much you could see it. Can you see it there, Michael?
A little, but we can actually share the link to that article online after this
Yes,
as well, so that our
that's,
viewers can read.
yeah, this is my whole story, and it gives you all the 12 camps I was in. Listen.
How old were you when you moved to the United States?
I moved to the United States. I was about, I think, 24.
And your uncle, who was in London, do you know if he knew what was going on and if there was anything he tried to do, or if you were able to have any contact with him at the beginning of the war?
Not in the beginning of the war, no. We have never any contact in the beginning of the war. Then, after I was liberated, I was trying to get in touch with him. That was by the time I got around, it was 1946. And it was just a few months after he passed away. but I knew he had a son. So, and I was in contact with a cousin until 1950, 50 or 51. And then I lost contact. I didn't know what happened to her. But I knew my uncle had a son. So in 1972, when I went to Israel, I said on the way back, I'm going to stop in London and find out what happened to my cousin. So I came back, and after we got up got off the airport, went to the hotel, and I was trying to look in the phone book if I can find anything. Nothing. I called Jewish organizations to see if they have anything. I couldn't find anything. So the next day, I took a taxi and I said I had the address from the cousin I lost contact with. And I'll go to this address and find out what happened. So I went to this address and ring the doorbell. He was living up on the second floor and nobody answered. Downstairs was a barber shop. So the man, the owned the barber shop, came out and asked, "Who are you looking for?" Well, so I told him. Oh, he says, "No, she passed away, but she had daughter, had a brother-in-law who lives next block here, had a shoe store. Let me take you over to him and he'll get you in touch with the family." So he took me over, and right away he called my cousin. My uncle's son lived about 2 blocks away from there. He came over, and then we got on the train, the subway, whatever there, and we went to her daughter. So I got in touch with them all. So I was lucky enough to meet my cousin and his wife, and they had a daughter. And we were in touch. They were here a couple of times. And a year later, he had a heart attack and he passed away. So I was in touch with his wife for a while. And then suddenly she passed away. But they had one daughter, which I'm still in touch today. So that's what happened to the family in England.
Thank you very much. And I also, just a quick word to some of the members of our audience who are talking about Joe recording a video. We actually had students record museum a couple of summers ago, and you can find that on our the museum's YouTube channel. Joe, what is an important message that you would like people to take away from hearing you speak?
Well, my main message is to educate the young people today, to let them know what really happened, and not forget that, God forbid, it could happen again if you don't do something about it. If you hear something or you see something. So just to educate the young people, that's the most important thing. I also tell you, I have a friend in England now, London, which we met actually the museum, show you the importance of the museum. That a couple came here from England, they had a daughter here in the valley, and at the time they tried to get in touch with the museum, and they saw on the museum that a man Joe Alexander is going to talk, and he was born in Kowal, Poland. So she came to the museum to meet me, and she told me that her father was from this Kowal, from the same town. And the father was, we grew up together. We were friends, a very close friend together. Matter of fact, I gave her a lot of pictures what I had from after the war. And she just wrote an article in a Jewish, I think it's a Jewish paper in London, which were 2,000 people entered, and she came in the fifth about that article. I think, Michael, you probably may have it because we send it to Beth, that article,
Yes,
which is,
and
I
thank you
mean, it
so much.
shows you, yeah,
Yes.
the importance of the museum, how people can connect.
Thank you so much for sharing this with everyone this morning. We really appreciate that. Did you ever find out what happened to your brothers and sisters and your parents?
No, the only thing I know, that's the only one I know, because I left my parents, two sisters, and one brother in the Warsaw Ghetto, which I don't know what happened to them, I don't. But the one younger brother who came out with me, with the sisters, and my younger brother and I, we came out of the ghetto, went home. They were taking my sister after I went to the camps, after I went home. And they were taken, the sister and my brother were taken to the Logic ghetto. I got one letter in the first camp I was in there in Poznan that they took my young brother, he was 12 years old. And at that time, they didn't have the gas chambers. They were gassing people on trucks. They were running trucks on wood and putting the fumes inside the truck. So she wrote me a letter, said they picked my little brother up, and I know, and he was taken to a camp named Chelmno. So that's the only one I know what happened to. But the rest, the hair, I don't know what happened to her. And the rest of the family, I have no idea what happened to them. So the reason you know is me, because I don't know when they passed away anybody. So I can't celebrate the Yurtzeit. So I made it me on Yom Kippur, the Yurtzeit for my family.
Thank you. And it's actually, I'm glad you shared that with everyone because we're coming up on Yom Kippur in just a few days. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
We have time for just another question or two. When did you start sharing your experiences, and was it ever uncomfortable for you to do so?
No, it was never uncomfortable. In the beginning, it was maybe a little harder because, I never spoke before. And to start out talking to people where you're not familiar with a lot of people. But it got better when I started first. Actually, the first time I spoke to, we believe I had a friend of mine, which here in Culver City, they're called the Exchange Club. It's not just a Jewish club. It's a Jewish Gentile. They meet every Tuesday, I think. And that friend of mine asked me once, "Well, Joe, why wouldn't you talk to our club on a luncheon?" So that was, I think, in 1997. That was the first time. And then I have a neighbor. She used to teach at the Temple Bet Am at a school. at the Pressman Hebrew Academy. She was teaching eighth graders, I believe, and she was teaching Holocaust. So she said, "Come and talk to them," and that's when it started. I was talking to this school, some other schools to talk. I talked to Sinai Temple and some other temples here. And then one day, it's about 4 years, I think already. I got a call from Bob Gemender, and when he met somebody who knew me, he told him about me. So he called me and he asked me if I wanted to talk to the museum. And that's when I started talking at the museum. And he was a wonderful man.
For those of you who don't know, Bob Jeminder was a survivor in our community who
Yeah,
unfortunately passed away about 2 years ago, but he was a very active speaker at our museum. So thank you for mentioning
yeah.
that.
He was a,
We just have, let's see, time for about 2 more questions. When you were living in Germany after the war, how did the Germans treat you?
no, they treat me actually okay. They treat me all right. I had no problem. I had no problem living there. Actually, we did very good. I had a very good life in Germany. Very good. But I wasn't planning to live there, to stay. It was a temporary until I can get out. But I had very good in Germany, cars, motorcycles, with everything. And the people, so I was treated okay.
And I think this is a nice question to end on. Are there any memories that you have of your family that you would like to share? Anything specific that stands out about your family?
Well, first of all, I never forget. I always think about them. And we were a very close family. Very nice life. We lived a very good life. And my family, we were all belong to Jewish organization, to a Zionist organization, or you call it a chalutz, you know, and very active. We were always very active. And so we always meet and we had different occasions, different things going on. Oh, a very happy life. Very good.
Thank you for sharing that. I would like to just let the audience know, those of you who are listening on Zoom, we have links in the chat to the Jewish Journal article that Joe mentioned and to the film that produced at our Museum of Life. So I invite you to just take a few seconds to copy and paste those before the Zoom ends. Joe, I want to thank you again so much for being with us this morning and sharing your story with us this afternoon. Everybody appreciates it so much. We received several comments during and after your talk from just thanking you for sharing such an inspirational story, and that people really appreciated hearing your testimony and having this opportunity. And I know that you've spoken to countless numbers of students over the years, so your testimony is so important to share, and we appreciate it so much. On behalf of the museum, thank you so much for everything you do. And of course, we wish those in our audience who observe a meaningful Yom Kippur on Monday. And again, Joe, we appreciate you sharing the yard site date that you chose for your family. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you to the museum to give me the opportunity to talk there whenever it's possible. I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Of course, you're so
And
welcome,
Happy
and our
New Year to
survivor
everybody.
testimony. Well, thank you. Happy New Year to everybody, and we appreciate you being here and listening. Again, every Thursday we have survivor speakers at 11 o'clock. So join us next Thursday at 11. Thank you, everyone.